haven't seen you in like 2 weeks.
Gonna hear like familiar to you guys.
Yeah.
You know,
This is our best place to start.
I'm like right here. Yeah, this way you get video and audio. The microphones are so that you can work.
And it's like a mixed edition thing. And he's called it that's 2 marks against you.
That's too our friends, I don't know if I probably have, our friends that have a son with spinal bifida.
No,
He like really likes spinal bifida walk. And he goes to the teams and they run with 2 days. His name is Nathan. And
Just so it's
Astro
we can do
Babies.
that right now.
Oh,
So we're the Astro Babies.
I love it. That's so cute.
I haven't done that in a while.
Gives a little more room.
Very clever. Hi, how are you? Good, how are you? Small group today, maybe because of the rain. Maybe, probably. All right. Well, it's 12 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Hi, welcome everyone to the February Doctoral Student Colloquium. I'm so glad you guys are made it in the weather. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator for today's presentation. So thank you.
Thanks, Janina. Welcome everybody to the School of Education Doctoral Student Colloquium Series. My name's Cameron Casopoulos. I'm with the Sport Coaching Leadership Program. I'll be your moderator for today. We're pleased that everyone's able to attend both in the room, on campus, and also online. Where's the owl right there? And this series is an opportunity for our doctoral students to share their research and to learn from their peers, faculty and staff. Each month, an EDD and PhD student presents their research, and this offers both on-campus staff and faculty, but also for those online. We hope that the students are able to connect with each other and develop a sense of peer and community that is an invaluable part of supporting our students in their journey through the program. Each student presenter is also asked to write a research brief, and that relates to their presentation, and that's included in an edited publication titled the Doctoral Student Research Briefs, which is published on the School of Education's website. The research brief is a way to disseminate our doctoral students' research and share in the colloquium in a concise format with relevance to education. So each presenter today will have 20 minutes to share their research, and we'll move on to questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So you can save your questions for the end. We'll open up the mics for questions for audience both online and in the room. If you're online using Zoom, there's a raise your hand button. So if you have questions when each of our presenters are finished, you're more than welcome to chime on in. So I want to introduce our first presenter for today, May Manasong, who is a third-year PhD student here in the School of Education, and is in the education leadership track under the supervision of Dr. Roche. Lucky you. Prior to May's doctoral studies, she did 2 master's degrees, one in industrial and organizational psychology at Sacramento State, and also masters in organizational behavior and evaluation at Claremont Graduate University, just outside of LA, which I did not know. So in addition to being a research assistant, she's also an editorial board member of the School of Education's Emerging Voice in Education journal, which I think is a very proud journal that we have here in the School of Education. Her research interests center on different applications of mentoring, which I think is personally a really valuable and important topic, and specifically in the areas of positive leadership and career outcomes for minorities, women of colour, and also other marginalised groups. So May seeks to explore how these different populations thrive for mentoring. So May, I'll hand it over to you. And her title is Mentoring Approaches of Minoritized Women, Insights from Administrative Leaders in Higher Education.
So I'm here today. today to present a portion of the results from a larger study I'm conducting with my research advisor, Dr. Ghosh. So specifically, I'm focusing on the mentoring approaches of women of color who are administrative leaders in higher education. So a little bit of background. So universities rely heavily on mentoring to promote the career interest and the development of basically everyone in the community, from students to staff to other faculty to also people who are aspiring to be in leadership positions. And mentoring is a high service demand, but is actually weighted less in terms of the tenure and promotion process for faculty members who are often tasked with leading mentoring initiatives and mentoring in their own day-to-day work schedules. So this is primarily very problematic for minoritized women because they often experience large volumes of mentoring requests and advising requests from basically everyone. And they're also expected to have high engagement in advising and mentoring. So women and minorities want to also uplift other marginalized groups. So it's not just a service demand, it's something that they want to incorporate into their actual work. So women and students of color tend to also seek women of color out over their white and minoritized male counterparts, primarily due to the perception of perhaps an inappropriate relationship with their, if they have a men of color mentor. And also men of color do take advantage of their male privilege in shaping how their work actually looks like, so they can say no to a mentoring request regardless of who it's coming from if they don't see utility in that mentee or potential in that mentee, per the X-Men literature, not accusing anyone of it. So this results in an overburdening of service obligations, which contributes to issues with tenure and promotion for women of color because they're preoccupied with these service demands. And then even if they wanted to focus on work, they're still usually tasked with spearheading diversity initiatives by their university. So this slows their career progress down even more. So when discussing mentoring, I'm using the theoretical frameworks of traditional mentoring and relational mentoring. So traditional mentoring is when a senior organizational member develops and supports a more junior organizational member. And a relational mentoring is basically regardless of seniority, the people in the dyad, it's a two-way street. So it isn't just one person giving to the other person, it's mutual, a mutual learning partnership. And then holding behaviors, which is a special category that focuses on mutual support and protection to things that the mentee finds upsetting. So maybe racist situations, sexist situations. So it's not a mentoring approach per se, it's more of a mentoring activity that individuals can engage in. So mentoring, again, is designed to support the mentee. These can include the advocacy and sponsorship, so traditional career support, and also psychosocial support in terms of guidance, friendship, counseling, role modeling, and again, mutual support and protection. For the latter two, relational mentoring and holding behaviors. However, there's a dearth of information on how minoritized women mentor successfully, given the mentoring is an expectation rather than a voluntary activity that they engage in. So I only found one article during my literature search that examines the different approaches of specifically Black male and female faculty. And female faculty tend to take on the burden of establishing deeper, more personal connections and often act as a second maternal figure to their mentee. While Black male faculty tend to just focus on the career support aspect, so giving them stretch assignments, sponsoring them, being their advocate, rather than developing those deep emotional bonds. And they also tend to turn down, again, mentoring opportunities to focus on research productivity. So they may have maybe 1 or 2 mentees, while their Black female counterparts might have 3, 4, 5 mentees that they're heavily invested in. And these have larger implications for the promotion and tenure process, as women of color in general may be preoccupied, again, with mentoring and not focused on their research productivity. So this brings us to the research question, is how do minoritized women approach mentoring with similar and dissimilar others? So people similar to their backgrounds or people who have different demographic backgrounds. So I'm particularly interested in like what type of support they provide. Does it differ for majority or minoritized students, staff, junior faculty? Do they feel burnt out? Things like that. So in terms of the design, so for this study, Dr. Ghosh and I employed IPA to construct meaning from interpretations of the participants' lived experience. We also took an intersectionality approach because it acknowledged that mentoring approaches and experience of women of color, especially women of color who are leaders, differ from their white and male counterparts due to the intersection of their dual marginalized status as women and as minorities. So their mentoring approach may actually differ due to their gender and their race. So we recruited 10 participants. We used purposive sampling to recruit current educational leaders in STEM related fields because their race and their gender may be more salient in these fields because they're highly underrepresented. And then we're looking at this population because they have successfully navigated the tenure and promotion process to achieve their leadership positions. So they can give insight into how they actually successfully manage their service-related duties. And then we used snowball sampling in order for them to contact women who fit our criteria, who may be interested in sharing their insights. For the data collection, it was a semi-structured interview via Zoom, 60 minutes. We recorded the sessions. For the larger study, we were generally focused on the challenges that they experienced during their leadership journey and the role that mentoring played in their successes and also their failures. And then I transcribed the interviews. I met with Dr. Ghosh and we went back and forth and we generated follow-up questions in order to gain clarity to establish more rigor in our data collection and our interpretation. So here are some of the demographics. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but we had 10 minoritized women leaders from 2 East Coast universities. The sample was predominantly women of African American descent, followed by Asian descent and Latin descent. They held titles of dean and director. I didn't specify because I wanted to ensure anonymity. All participants utilized a traditional mentoring approach, with only 7 using some facets of relational mentoring and 3 explicitly using holding behaviors. The no is not an indication that they don't use it. We just didn't discuss it. Again, this is a few of the questions at the end of our interview, so we didn't get to really probe as much as we wanted, which I will discuss in our limitation section. So in terms of the data analysis, a lot of readings of the transcripts, note-taking, themes emerged. We categorized those themes. We went back and forth and we created a code book. And after each subsequent transcript we analyzed, we also revised the code book as needed. So in terms of the findings, so the findings were emergent while others are actually found in and supported by the literature. So motivation to mentor. So an emergent theme is basically why did they engage in mentoring, given all of their service and publish demands, as well as systemic barriers to advancement. So a lot of them had leadership aspirations, so they have to also focus on how do I get ahead. So the reason why they mentor is paying it forward, passing on the knowledge, increasing mentoring opportunities for minorities and for women, and a few believe that mentoring could actually improve the community, the nation, and society. And all of them really wanted to engage in mentoring because they benefited from mentoring. It was something that was very salient in their leadership development journey, and something that they wanted to engage in for others in order to help others. So in terms of the mentoring activities, the participants spent most of the conversation detailing the specific approaches that they had, what it basically looked like to them on a daily basis, or some of them had a few examples of mentees that they've actually mentored. Mostly described mentoring activities they engaged in with students rather than any faculty or any of the staff in their current leadership positions. Usually related in their roles as faculty, as I usually have, they spent most of their time mentoring with students when they were primarily focused on teaching and having those advising hours. And the mentoring activities fall into the three categories that I described previously: traditional, relational, and holding behaviors. So for traditional mentoring, again, due to that sense of purpose for mentoring others with either similar or dissimilar backgrounds, they engaged in career development, psychosocial support, and role modeling, which were identified by Kram. They often drew directly from their prior experiences, as one explained. Same thing that people have done for me in terms of trying to find opportunities and help people to sort of promote and push themselves, and all that other good stuff. And then in terms of relational mentoring, they specifically talked about, affirming the authentic self of their mentee. So if their mentee was of marginalized background, they're like, be proud of your heritage, use your heritage. Don't shy away from your heritage because higher education may discourage displays of whatever cultural background they're coming from. And then they didn't mind going into the personal, so not strictly work, a very holistic approach. They didn't segment, we can only focus on whatever assignment or work tasks you're talking about. If you're having issues with work-life balance, let's talk about that and things of that nature. They also learn from their mentees, such as learning what's relevant for their students, so addressing the age gap. We all get older, but our students tend to stay the same age, 18, 19, 20. So it's seeing what's culturally relevant for them. And then they also seem to naturally engage in relational mentoring, shown in this quote. Through the act of mentoring, they became aware that they themselves needed to engage in two-way developmental and continued growth and development. So I'm feeding them, but who's feeding me was very much standard for the participants. So in terms of holding behavior, given their unique mentoring experiences and leadership journey, the participants gave numerous examples of how they enacted these holding behaviors for others. Specifically for minoritized backgrounds, when their mentee was dealing with anxiety-producing situations. Many say that they had an affinity to actually mentor women and minorities. They were accessible and provided that safe space for their mentees to disclose whatever it is that was bothering them, whether or not it's work-related. And they also focused on development of the skills that were crucial for minorities and women to be successful as professionals, such as self-advocacy, and picking one's battle was a big thing. So they taught their mentees how to be 1 in 50 in a room. They're specifically talking about a classroom in the health science space. So preparing them for that in this learning community, school, rather than being a professional and being shocked that, wow, I'm the only woman or I'm the only minoritized individual at my office space. How do I navigate those type of relationships? And then these findings altogether support what's already in the extant literature in terms of traditional mentoring, relational mentoring, and holding behaviors. So another thing that was emergent was the mentoring structure. So to provide a counterpoint to the notion that I presented earlier. Okay, so women engaged in mentoring episode. These are short, high quality mentoring interactions rather than engaging in the development of deep connections that last, decades. Anyway, we're just gonna speed right through this. The takeaways. So there, again, some findings were emergent, some findings were supported by the literature. So these findings fill the research gap on mentoring by providing the perspectives of women of color, which is really absent, provides examples of different ways women of color can go about mentoring that doesn't have to be burdensome to them. It doesn't have to take away from their other service and job-related demands. Limitations, so mentoring approaches weren't the focus. We had a few questions towards the end of our interview about it, but we had enough to generate findings. We were also unable to determine the contributions to the mentees' leadership development. Again, they were just talking about their students and helping their students rather than seeing if their mentoring actually helped their students, get a career or aspire to leadership positions. And then the range of participants was very narrow. Again, the majority were African-American women and they were all US based. Most of them are US based. So the findings may be more reflective of their experiences rather than the large experience of women of color in general. Future research directions. Okay, qualitative and quantitative studies, always a must. To expand the findings and gather more information on how they balance their different service and career responsibilities. Dyadic approaches, so basically interviewing the mentor and interviewing their mentee and seeing if their things align and how they navigate these relationships, especially when the demographic makeup is different. So it's, maybe a woman of color mentor and a white male mentee. Focus on strategies for balancing their commitments and then identifying factors that facilitate relational mentoring. Again, mentoring is it can be very burdensome if it's only you giving everything out and not you taking anything in. And references. I want to thank my cohort members, Dr. Ghosh, who couldn't be here today, for all of their support. Here are my references. Any questions?
So now's an opportunity. Maybe Eric, if we open it up and see if there's anyone online, to see if there's any questions. Anyone in the room who has some questions for May?
You mentioned briefly in the beginning about the how mentorship is weighted in the tenure and promotion process. And I'm curious if your interview shed any light on their perceptions of that factor, and if so, what their or how they would go about addressing that potential issue.
So a lot of them, from what I remember, did mention that they basically felt overburdened with some of the demands made on them. They didn't really go into too much detail in terms of the balancing aspect. They were just like, you just have to do it. But really, a lot of them talking about like the self-advocacy, so knowing what you need to get done and knowing your limits, and then sometimes just not having that battle. Like if it's something that you perceive to be racist or sexist, whether it's be that certain assignment or not getting that assignment, is that battle worth fighting? If not, then just I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was curious from the perspective of they're in these leadership positions now where they might have some influence over how mentorship is weighted in the promotion process, and has their perspective changed?
In terms of how they go about mentoring and basically relating to their colleagues, has been influenced by their mentoring experiences. So some of them are, actually most of them are more apt to give advice, more apt to give help, more apt to get feedback. You know, decisions are more democratic rather than authoritarian. But in terms of trying to shift, because that's a cultural thing, and for them it's kind of out of scope. Like it's because it's what higher education is or academia is. It's you have all of these demands on your time, but what's, and I mean, we have some people probably know better than I do, but in terms of the literature, that the publications and the research and the grants are weighted more. Like, can you do that? Rather than, oh, okay, you have 5 mentees who have gone on to do really great things. Unfortunately, so it would be a cultural shift that you're talking about rather than something that one person can do. I mean, so it would have to be like all of leadership across all of the colleges say maybe we should weight it more equally. I mean, there's of course some variance in terms of the type of school perhaps, but in terms of the participants, it wasn't something that they felt that they could do. It was more of like, how do I treat other people as a reflection of how I was treated, good or bad.
Thank you.
Are you saying it's weighted based on their mentoring of students or mentoring of other faculty?
It would be both. So mentoring of people in general would be one of the service demands. They didn't, most of them talked about students. And that's, I think for them in terms of what they felt what mentoring was, oh, I'm the more traditional mentoring model of I'm a faculty and I'm mentoring a student who's the junior, rather than maybe a peer. So a lot of what Dr. Ghosh and I would say, oh, did you also have these type of developmental relationships with your peers? And then they have to actually think about it. So it's probably something that in terms of their mentoring schema, they didn't really account for or don't see as mentoring. It might just be like, oh, that's my friend, I'm giving them advice. That's also mentoring.
So was there any discussion, because in your presentation, and I'm sure you're only giving only a cross section of what you covered, it seemed as if they focused mostly on their schema, what they experienced that was good for them. Was there any shift to say, okay, no, I have to make some adjustment here based on this current generation or based on this particular person's?
Yeah, so one of them happened to have a Latin background, and then given the political climate that we're in, that's what was more salient to their students. So instead of, so this was someone in STEM field, so engineering, I believe, and she was very much like how I grew up. It was more of getting women into STEM. But now that's not really as relevant. It's more of my students who have, especially those who are Hispanic or Latinx, getting them to basically be comfortable in the climate the political climate that we're in. So it's shifting in terms of their focus. So they actually go out of their way to mentor culturally different, mostly male students, rather than focusing on women. So that was one of the more salient things in terms of just the age gap.
One of the things I'm curious to know, since you're looking at STEM, that you're quite well, I'm curious in particular the biomedical health sciences, since they're more female than male in those areas, especially among minority. So, I'm curious.
That's a good question. So we did have a few, they have nursing backgrounds and counseling backgrounds. So there will be more women there. But in terms of women of color, especially in leadership positions, they're still underrepresented, like extremely underrepresented. So even though they have,
no, what I mean was that they're more underrepresented women than they're underrepresented men in the health sciences.
So I don't don't know in terms of demographics, but in terms of what they were telling me, that they still had access to men of color, usually Asian men of color in the health sciences. Is that
Well,
what
are Asian men considered underrepresented minority in academia? I don't think so.
Yes. Depending on which type of ethnicity you're talking about.
'Cause I know a lot of places, a lot of Asian people, they're not considered lower
Yeah.
academia.
Like I know for my old school, Filipinos weren't considered underrepresented, but Vietnamese and Cambodian students were, and that was reflective of their staff and faculty as well. So Asians in general, it actually really depends on your ethnicity, whether or not you're underrepresented. I know a lot of the Southeast Asian demographics in terms of certain engineering aren't considered, certain engineering and STEM aren't considered underrepresented, and they're actually, so a lot of the articles will say when we're talking about underrepresented, they'll specify we're not talking about these people. So it's very discipline specific.
How easy was it for you during coding to delineate, distinguish between traditional and relational approaches to mentoring? Because I'm assuming these two concepts sometimes overlap. It's not
Yeah.
that easy, but
I
practices.
think a lot of the difficulty was the psychosocial aspect of the counseling and the friendship. That tends to overlap with relational mentoring, but we took it as are they talking about the personal versus the professional? Because I can be providing you guidance, friendship, and counseling, but it's only related to work. But if I'm also providing that in terms of the personal aspect, then that's relational mentoring. That's more of the holistic. It isn't bounded to a work domain. So we were very, we went back and forth in terms of what do they mean by this, and we would just follow up. Like, okay, were you talking about this in terms of just work, or in terms of just both work and personal life? Yeah, and a lot of the time it was more easy to distinguish that, just how they talk about mentoring and work and their leadership experiences. Some of them were very much like only talking about work, and that was their significance, and they weren't talking about personal. And we'd ask them directly as well, like, did your mentor do this, or do you do this with your students? And they said, so we didn't like give them like, was that relational mentoring there? And we were asking like if it expanded the boundary.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from online that
No online.
No one online. Maybe Janine, have we got time for one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions? Oh, I think fascinating research and it brings to light the importance that we all play in terms of mentoring and being mentored. I know for me it's a reminder I need to thank a few people and say thank you for helping us get to where we are, but also to our next presenter, the importance of communication. And Dr. Kram is going to talk to us a little about the importance of writing, and particularly business writing. So, Argy May, thank you very much. And now I'll introduce Kram Britt, who's a recent graduate of the Doctoral program in Education, Leadership and Management with a concentration in Human Resource Development, and graduated in September 2019, which was apparently last year. Karen began her professional career in human resource as a human resource generalist with a specialization in classification analysis and talent acquisition management. After completing a master's in business administration at Penn State, she positioned herself in higher ed. Karen has 28 years in higher education as an academic administrator, faculty member with private colleges and community colleges. As a professor, she has taught in business and economics at the community college level and has focused on improving business writing skills of students and preparing them for the workplace. Since completing a doctoral program at Drexel, Karen presents her research findings to business communication, affinity groups and journals. And I think in our conversation earlier, when was the last time anyone wrote a letter? Actually got a pen and wrote on a piece of paper and put it in the mail, because I think that for many of us, technology has sort of pushed us towards these devices. So writing is not just on the machines, but also how we connect with each other. So Karen's going to speak to us about teaching business writing at community college and improving our writing skills. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm a little taller, so I'm going to stand over here to the side. Thank you. Good afternoon to the School of Education, and thank you for the opportunity to present my research. So I completed my dissertation, actually defended in August, and finished the program for September. I am a professor of business and economics at a community college in Northeast Pennsylvania. In addition to being an educator, my interest and research interest was really to develop interventions that was going to improve student learning outcomes, specifically in business education research. So the study that I'm presenting gives an opportunity to engage community college business students in writing higher quality business documents. So our time together this afternoon is going to look at a particular program that I used within my research study. So writing across the curriculum, writing in the discipline, some terms that many of us have heard. And however, when it came to the community college and the induction of these types of programs, it happened in the early 1980s. However, they struggle at the community college level in regards to institutional support and personnel in order to be able to have an effective program. But it doesn't mean that writing isn't important. We understand that as a fundamental within our education as we move forward. So what I tried to look at in the development of writing skill in regards to colleges and the disciplines that we have, and a challenge for community college professors in particular, is we're working with a population of students who enter to school unprepared in some basic skills, and the skills that they're going to need to succeed. So as any other professor, we're concerned with content, we're concerned with critical thinking skills, writing skills, and the need to integrate that into our course content. And we're doing that up until a sophomore level, until the student goes into the workforce or transfers into another institution. So the program that I decided to look at and infuse in my research is a program, Business Writing Across the Core, which was developed at Ramapo College of New Jersey. And they were in their first trial of this particular program. And my interest was in the gap really that I found was I wanted to see how a program like this that was in my content area would work at a community college. They have 4 years of working with students. I've got 2. What can I do to make this work? So my central research question was taking this particular program and looking at how it would affect my students in their writing and their ability to write. And the sub-question from an instructor viewpoint is looking at, the before and after in their writing within that program. And then a second sub-question from the students is their perception on writing. And that was very, very interesting to hear and see what students thought about their own writing and writing in general. So there were 3 literature streams in regards to the research. First was just basic business writing strategies. There's a lot of research out there in regards to using it as a heuristic tool, utilizing white paper, which is done a lot in regards to corporate activity, using business writing consultants, those types of things. And then I dove into research that was looking at writing across curriculum and in disciplines, specifically where we are in that, how effective that has been. And that, not that it has not been effective, but looking at it closer for my 3rd stream, and that was business writing across the course, specifically writing in accounting, specifically writing in macroeconomics. So the research design was a triangulation of mixed methods case study. My quantitative was a pre and post in regards to assessment with the t-test on the comparison of the means. And then the qualitative was semi-structured interviews, and then actually bringing that data together to see what the outcome would be. The population that I'm working with or work with, I work at a community college, but I'm at a satellite campus, which is a little smaller, about almost 200 business majors. These students, about 77% of these students work while they're taking classes. And out of that 77%, 28% work 30 hours a week or more and still carry a whole load of classes. Many of them, a third of the student population is first-generation college students. So when I look at that and look at the breakdown of the students that I'm working with, I'm looking at some other areas and issues that I have to address in regards to their performance in the classroom. So the method on the quantitative side was the pre-writing assessment. So I was looking at specific business courses and specific business documents that they were to prepare. Then there was a concentrated instruction hour, or 3-hour period of business writing across the course that is specific, and I'll talk about that. And then the post-writing assessment to see the effect. And then the qualitative, as I said, was semi-structured interviews. There were 3 individual interviews and then also a focus group of 6 students. In analyzing the data, the interpretation of the T-score, the comparison of the means, the pre and post assessment, reviewing the transcripts, again, with the qualitative side, and then coming up with themes and first cycle of coding. I did a pilot study before rolling out the actual study. In my macroeconomics course, there were 13 students. They were to develop a business memo. I looked at it, evaluated according to the rubric, and I'll get to that in just a second. And then actually did the instruction with them, and then they did the same type of business document after the instruction to see the effectiveness. After reviewing that information, making sure that my instrument was great and all was well, then we rolled out with 3 other documents: an executive summary, a proposal, and a business case in 3 other different classes. So I had a hypothesis whether or not there was going to be not any significant impact in regards to their writing skill, or alternatively that there was going to be an impact. The rubric that we used was significant because I'm looking for improvement or change, specifically in clarity. The overall readability of the piece is the main point conveyed. Logic and organization, the rhetoric of the writing, the mechanics, the literacy of the writing, looking at proper vocabulary, spelling, sentence construction, grammar, punctuation, and then style. Is it what I call boardroom ready? Is this document ready for the boardroom? So with that, with the other 3 documents that the students had to produce in regards to my breakdown demographically, the actual study included 23 students, 9 males, 14 females, 20 were sophomores in their 2nd year within their business program, and 3 were freshmen. And I thought I had a really good cross analysis in regards to students overall. The actual writing instruction focused on 4 areas of writing. What was the description and purpose of this document that you're producing? What was the form and style? What was your audience and your key elements? So going back to looking at the purpose of the study and the construction of why this is important, looking at, are our graduates able to produce well-written business documents? So my research has shown that that is not the case. It didn't matter if they came from a 2-year, 4-year, online MBA program, still not be able to prepare business documents when they got to the job. So American firms spending millions of dollars on writing remediation for first time or for newly hired individuals. That's an issue where students are coming out of higher education really not knowing what a sentence is and how did they get a degree. And so, of course, you know, we have to take a look at what that means in regards to what we're writing. So all three documents, the executive summary, the proposal, and the business case, was looking at these particular elements, and that was presented in the writing instruction. And they were different for each of the documents that they produced. So I'll move forward with that. So the results: the clarity, logic, and organization, mechanics, and style. When I looked at pre-writing versus post-writing, the most significant increase in regards to performance was in the mechanics of writing, the vocabulary of writing. And that was interesting because when I looked at the same results from categories that were acceptable to unacceptable to acceptable, still mechanics of writing is what floated to the top. That is what their improvement was. And then the last category, from acceptable to excellence. Again, mechanics of writing is what had the most improvement. So on the qualitative side, in doing the actual semi-structured interviews with the students, three things seemed to emerge, and that was overall business courses. What do they require in regards to business writing? And we all know academic writing is not business writing, right? Because business writing, we write very quickly. We use a lot of bullets. We don't have time. So let's keep it moving, right? But having that experience within the classroom, how much do we have? Academic rigor in regards to the writing. And we found that students, the more they had the opportunity to write, their level of confidence seemed to increase, and also their skill development. And then the overall program experience within the program they were in. You know, how was that experience overall in regards to their writing? So some students were saying, like, you know, I thought I could spell, or I think I could spell. Well, I don't spell, and let's be truthful and candid. You know, I write like I text, and this is an issue. You know, come on, you know, it is an issue. Again, bringing this information together, again, mechanics of writing seem to be the improvement area of what students took away from the study. So when we look at overall summary of what we did in regards to the quantitative and the qualitative, all the students took English 1, they took English 2, they took business communications. The takeaway was, this is great, but we can't put all the pressure on English 1 and English 2. And we understand as faculty, you think, well, you took these classes, you should be able to write. It's not enough. Business communication is a fantastic course at this particular institution. It needs to be foundational, but it has to be more than just that. The students desired more practice in business writing. They liked the crossover of business writing from one course to the next, so that there was some similarity moving forward. And they wanted more detailed feedback. They don't want a couple of good points in a margin from a faculty member. They want more critique, more detailed feedback. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. And then also, they really gained an understanding to say, you know what? I understand that writing is important in the workplace. I need to do better at that. Some of the conclusions, again, requiring more business courses and business writing, and looking at writing assignments. How does it develop their skill and the overall experience within the program of study? Implications, I think the main takeaway here from a faculty standpoint, having more content-driven writing, but also recognizing the writing culture. The writing culture today is not the writing culture 15 years ago. It's not the writing culture 25 years ago. When we look at how we write and the time it takes to write, it takes time. Are we giving students enough time to write, to process? And understanding, yes, all the technology that we have available to us is great, but it doesn't really negate when you're in the workplace that writing skill is still necessary. And if we can do that and improve that type of experience, we'll be able to then produce students that have the learning outcomes and have the skill they need for the workplace. Recommendations, more business writing seminar. I think the business writing across the core program, I think it was effective for my study. Having affinity groups within my world in the community college level, statewide affinity groups that will look at business writing in regards to what we are doing for our students, and being able to have some foundational courses like our business communication course as a foundation, and then to build from there. So future, as I said, looking at statewide consortiums as a possibility, institutional support that definitely is lacking in the community college, and then looking at initiating some other types of programs within the content area of business. All right, so as I said, I think more writing is necessary. We can't get away from it. I mean, no matter how much we text, we still have to use correct grammar, correct punctuation. We know that you are evaluated on your ability to speak and your ability to write. And we have to be able to do that to students. So thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Would you say that writing is specific to the discipline? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, yes, and yes, yes. And this is the takeaway, because when you're in like the freshman, sophomore year, really freshman year, where you're taking English 1, English 2, you know, you might do narrative writing, you know, you might do a group thing, whatever the case may be. But beyond that, writing within the discipline is definitely where the need is. Content writing. So yeah, I understand, you know, again, academic writing is not business writing. And I need that experience. But when I get into the workplace and my supervisor says I need a sales report in 1 hour and it has to be right, it's not academic writing. It's business writing. Have I had enough practice in business writing to produce that document?
I can extend on that, having spent a lot longer than I meant to getting to an economics degree. The language of the particular areas seems like that's part of the challenge. Can you speak a little bit to just that element of using the right words, that not only it's the difference between, say, texting, academic writing and business writing, but then going into the specific discipline.
Yeah, because when we were chatting, you know, economics, because I also teach it, it is like a different language. And being able to use the right terminology in the right context, extremely important to get the point across. So, you know, if I'm looking at a particular report or proposal that's going to bring in some economic implications for a community, what does that look like? Am I using the right terms as it relates to that particular document, that proposal that I'm going to be presenting? Yes.
So I love feedback as well. I'm curious, how do you change the culture at an institution with the faculty to make sure that it's consistent? Because when you look at things like negative transfer, a student who comes in and says, I've always gotten A's, my APA is perfect, and you're looking going, it is definitely not APA, it looks like a combination, but they have gotten A's. And unfortunately, it reinforces, and they actually believe that they're doing it correctly. So how do you approach that? Because it takes a village
Right.
to truly change that writing.
Well, of course, my research was that small in regards to what Ramapo has done. So what they have done is pull together their faculty and actually having a faculty group to talk about the feedback that's given. And, you know, I know a lot of times faculty are like, well, you know, I'm not an English professor, that's not my field. But understanding that is so very important. But bringing the faculty together to say, now this is what we're looking at in regards to giving detailed feedback, have some commonality and, you know, a denomination of that this is what we're going to do as a department. It has been effective for them. And having that faculty buy-in before the academic year begins, that this is what we're doing and this is what we're going to give in regards to feedback to students when it comes to their writing.
Have they noticed anything? I would think if you take that cultural approach, it should help with persistence, retention, and academic performance. I'm not sure if they're tracking any of that.
They're in their second iteration of doing their program. So I'll be in touch with them to see. Like I said, I wanted to see how it would be effective at the community college level, but theirs is very new within, the 4-year program itself. But they do a lot with faculty before the academic year and also within the academic year to, again, get the support and get the buy-in. Okay, any other questions?
Would you, based on your observations, would you also agree, or have you noticed that writing sometimes is not only discipline specific, but also culture specific, and that can be reflected in a specific discipline? Let's say business writing, when you have different students from different cultures, business writing in different cultures can be different. Have you ever encountered that issue, that challenge?
Not in my experience, because there is a cultural element, but there is a foundation of business writing that no matter what, there is a common base. And from my research is showing that they just need more time and they need more practice with it. Because no matter what the cultural background is, time is, unfortunately, cliche, time is money.
Yeah.
So again, I don't have time to read, a 5-page report. You've got to give it to me, take all of the fluff out. And that is universal. Now, how we operate from a different standpoint, not in regards to business writing, how we relate to one another culturally in a business meeting, and that business etiquette, that's different. That's different. But in regards to written communication, there's a commonality no matter what culture.
I see. Thank you.
Can you go more into the actual program that you used for the intervention? The biggest scores were in that mechanics area.
Right.
So what type of intervention were you doing with the
So
students there?
the instruction was looking at, as I said, those 4 areas and description, purpose, and those things. But what we did specifically is look at documents, and then they actually practiced describing and indicating, identifying those areas, and we did practice right within the classroom. And the other thing that was very important, a major takeaway, is we did pairing. So I did small groups, 2 by 2 type of thing, and then working together in regards to writing. That also was significant in regards to them talking about the writing. Okay, we have a case study to write. How are we going to, formulate this? How is it going to be organized? That was the writing instruction.
Just a quick, how would you translate this for online?
I think it could be done. The instruction could be done. Because in online, we do groups all the time. We all know that, right? I don't think there's a challenge in translating it into the online environment.
How would you do it?
It would be, again, with kind of the writing instruction and in regards to lectures, examples, and then pairing in regards to writing and producing documents. I don't think there would be, and that's a good question, because I don't think there would be an issue to do this online. I really don't. Because you could still do the same type of faculty meeting before the academic year to get faculty on board in regards to what kind of feedback.
Are we referring to on the student side, pairing, working together, discussing, all that kind of stuff seems to work well in a face-to-face setting, but in the online setting where people largely working in a, it's not asynchronous environment.
Okay, well, I mean, my online experiences, I've been in a lot of chat rooms with my online colleagues, a lot. We present projects online. Yeah, so that, to me, that really isn't a challenge. I mean, I don't know about anybody else. I mean, within my program, you know, we did quite a few things online, and we were in groups and we worked and we talked and, you know, and that definitely was not an issue whatsoever. We could get it done, and we did. Okay. Any other?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah, and thank you, Karen, and you made very insightful, a lot of hard work and lots for us to think about. Mark your calendars, either virtual or electronic. If you've got a book, otherwise March the 6th is the next time we'll all get together. So once again, let's thank Karen and Ivan.
I can't even remember.